Today, I am super excited to have Zanandi Botes with me, who I first came across on Twitter. I found some of her really fun crack.com articles about some of my favorite comedy shows, comedy performers, and I would literally start yelling at my phone in agreement with her. So I knew I had to have her on the show. But Zanandi, before we dive in, is there anything else that people should know about you and your connections to creating comedy?
Gosh, it all happened so suddenly, really. Like I used to study drama in college and like started experimenting with comedy, but then for years I wrote like television series for our local broadcaster here in South Africa. And I didn't do any comedy for a long time. And then crack just kind of happened and I was like, fun. And from there, yeah, I got some interesting gigs. Like I worked for a satire site called bunnyears.com. I ended up doing a Trailer Park Boys comic book story, which was fascinating and so much fun. Like I kind of like doing comedy comics too. That's great. So yeah, I'm just always like in the search of what's new, what can be done in terms of creating fun comedy, like literature, films, even. Yeah, I'm just all about the comedy and the horror, of course. Comedy horror, great little genre that I'm sure we'll be discussing in this podcast.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. And let's start right there because I know that you write about comedy horror and I love that you do. And I have a bit of a vested interest because I'm currently working on a novel, a young adult novel. And it's like I've got a little tinge of horror in Act One and then it merges a bit more into the kind of more com side of the rom com, but it's much more com than rom. So I'm fascinated by those genres, how they fit together. And you've got such a great insight into those genres. Why do you think they work so well together and what interests you about them?
Yeah, I've said I think comedy and horror is like cousins. Um, I think mainly because both genres are all about subverting expectations. I think like with horror, you've got the this twist and the shock value that makes people feel a certain way, and with comedy, it's kind of the same thing. You kind of want to bowl people over with like an unexpected joke that makes them laugh instead of be terrified. But yeah, I think those two play so well together. Like, yeah, I mean, we just love comedy horror. It's such a fun thing to balance too, like between being like suspenseful and terrifying, and then being suspenseful and kind of almost like sometimes if it can be anticlimactic, the punchline, or just like an absolute twist on something you usually know or the norm, that just makes you think about it differently and makes you laugh, of course. Like the silliness of it. I think horror can have a lot of silly in it.
Mm.
Comedy obviously works well with silly vibes and camp vibes. And I think there's just a lot of crossover with the two subgenres that just make them work well together.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you're probably sport for choice, but have you got any favorites? You can say more than one.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I think like modern, some of my favorite modern comedy horrors. I love Werewolves Within. Josh Rubin's Werewolves Within is a great comedy horror. Stuff like Wolf of Snow Hollow, that's almost a bit satirical in nature because I love my satire too. Yeah, there's actually so many. I'm a
Mm.
Scream fan, but maybe just because like I grew up in the 90s, diehard Scream fan. What about you? What comedy horrors do you like prefer?
Oh my goodness. I think I'm a little bit of a wimp when it comes to them. So, for example, I like them when it's in like the zombie and I like werewolves too, but I love the zombie like horror comedy end. So
Nice.
I really liked Life After Beth, which I would say is
Oh, love.
light horror, more sort of squirmy. That was my sort of wussy end of the scale.
Oh no, but I love that. I think yeah, like the Simon Pegg like
Mm,
movies, comedy
yeah.
horrors, they also fall into that. Oh, they're great
Yes.
fun, and I love that also because it's almost more accessible. I think for a wider audience, that type of comedy horror, because again, people who are a bit squirmish or don't come for like the gore and the like terrifying, that's a nice little sweet spot to kind of like get everyone involved and enjoying some good fun.
Yeah, I agree. And I wanted to ask you about tropes. You mentioned the Scream films, but you might have any number of films you'd love to refer to. What are some tropes in comedy? It could be straight comedy, it could be comedy horror that you really love, or conversely, that you think are pretty outdated and people are still using and they really annoy you.
Oh wow, that is a good question. Curveball question, Danielle.
I know, they're my
um,
favorite.
tropes. Yeah, let's think about tropes. Yeah, I do like the the who done it tropes. Like they're always
Mm,
fun. Kind of try to be very on point. Red herrings try to lead you to a certain way just to pull you back. Like, oh gosh, I never saw that coming. I think that'll never get old if done right, of course, which I think is a skill. I myself have never tried writing anything like that. Maybe one day. Yeah, tropes I don't appreciate. Gosh, I can't really think of any right now. Is there
Um,
anything that comes to mind for you?
yeah, well, I'll ask you a sort of slightly more general question around it, which is women in comedy and portrayals of women in comedy. So I know that's quite broad, but there are some things that do irritate me or that I would like to see balanced out a little bit when it comes to women in comedy films and the kind of roles that are written for them.
Yeah, that is true. I think that there's been a lot of conversation lately around, like having strong female characters, but then at the same time kind of getting bored with it in a way. I think it's like giving them fresh angles. Like,
Mm.
I mean, we all loved Bridesmaids, but I don't want to see another like women in a bakery in a comedy,
Hmm.
like, I think about Maggie Gyllenhaal in
Mm.
Stranger Than Fiction, also,
Oh
with
my
the
God, I
little
love that film.
bakery, and love
Mm-hmm.
that film. But I think we've had enough of like the
Mm-hmm.
women, like, baking and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Those little things. Give me like women in strange careers we haven't
Mm.
seen before. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of any right now. I
No.
don't know, a female firefighter or something
Mm.
like. Yeah, I think like occupation wise, maybe yeah, we're in for some. Give us an interesting like scenario where
Mm.
a woman is like yeah finding herself in a occupation that is wildly different from anything we've seen, and let the jokes play out.
I would love to see that too. Because I think the same is true of rom-coms sometimes. Like I know that they're in the genre, there can be great comfort for people in some of the predictability of it. And I think there have been interesting things that have been done like with some of the diversity and gender roles in rom-coms. But still when we look at like professions and context, it's like still another coffee shop scene, like still another two people in an office scene. There's so many fun opportunities that could be explored. So I like you coming at it with occupation. I think that's a fun angle.
Yeah, I think that's kind of also a thing that started irking people when, we started doing. Listen, I love the like Ghostbusters remake. I
Mm,
think it was 2016 Ghost. I thought it was very fun. I love all the actresses in it, and I thought they did great. It was very entertaining for me. But then we started having the all-female Ocean's 11
hmm.
movie, and it's kind of like, can we give them their own like stories and not just put them in like the male roles with the male occupations, and you know what I'm saying?
A
Like just
hundred
yeah, come
percent.
at a fresh
Yeah.
angle. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. Again, I just have the urge to shout, yes, at my screen, but I'll try not to blow the mic out because it's exactly the same thing that was in my brain. I also think there were some fantastic actresses in those films and loads of great writing, but also some frustration at being like, let's remake this with women. Let's have
you know
the women characters trying to be even more guysy than the guys. And that's where the joke is, like almost taking the same blueprint and putting women in it. And that's what's funny. It's like, but there's so many other angles.
100%. I mean, I think Bridesmaid did that so well, where you had the whole food poisoning scene whilst they were in their bridal like
Mm,
attire. And I mean, that was so fresh because, yes, that is like, a situation where women not being like, putting on like bridal dresses and whatever, but then having this terribly gross out experience. Like, that was a fresh thing. That was taking a trope that we usually saw only guys get to play on screen, giving it to women, but giving it to them in their own situation that is more
mm.
relevant to them. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I know it's really subjective and also hard to choose from the plethora of them, but are there any, if you had to pick just two or three comedic characters that you absolutely love, do you know what will come to top of mind, whether from series or
Ja-
films?
Jason Statham in Spy.
Yes.
Oh, he's just, yeah. His character in Spy was really revolutionary,
Mm.
honestly. I think none of us expected that from him. None of us expected any filmmaker to like put him in that situation. It was just really brilliant. I'm thinking about comedies. Oh, I have my cats here. Oh no. Hi cats.
Oh, no, they're
Saying hi.
welcome. Hello. We love
That
pets on the
never
show.
happens. Comedy characters. I'm thinking I watch so many
I
movies and so
know.
many shows. Oh, Barry in Barry is also brilliant. No, Hank in Barry is
Oh,
fantastic. Like I want a NoHo Hank fashion line. That needs to happen. Like he's just such a great character.
yeah. Okay.
Um
So again, I'm like so suppressing that I should just yell yes at the screen, because I really love Jason Statham in that film. I was like, I'm not the kind of person that generally quotes films a lot, but I was insufferable after watching that film at doing very bad Jason
Same
Statham impressions.
still.
So, and also just the other morning before I read your Jason Statham article, I literally spent about a half an hour riffing with my husband on potential films to put Jason Statham in just so I could see
Oh,
him do comedic acting. Because like, what about if it was this
love it.
combination? What if you paired it up with this? What if it was this? I just love him. So awesome.
Yes. Oh, he's really good. Yeah.
And also
Yeah, and I'm
massive
thinking,
Barry fan.
right? Oh gosh. I mean, we're in the new season, final season now, and it's just a hoot, absolutely. I mean, and no, Hank is everything. What a fantastic character. And I mean, Anthony Carrigan, I think is his name, the
I
actor.
don't know. Yeah, I only know his screen
Anthony
name.
Carrigan. I think, oh, I should know these things.
Oh, don't worry. No, he's
But
just, yeah.
yeah, he's wonderful. He's just everything that comes out of his mouth. He's like he's got this like fun camp vibe, but then also subtle acting. It's just really good from an actor's point of view. Also, it's just fantastic.
And what do you like about Barry? Because again, that was a show that when I started watching it in season one, I kept telling everyone to watch, and people were like, nah, not that into it. And I was like, how can you not be into it? It was like my favorite
What?
show. I was absolutely obsessed. So, what is it that you found great about it?
So I love dark comedy to begin
Mm,
with. I think it's also the same reason why I'm also like comedy horror because I love my horror. Dark comedy, yeah, it's just so delicious because it gives you so much, you know? I mean, you laugh, but then you're also like, what am I watching? You know, these
mm,
people are mad. It's yeah, I think the show is just really good at taking its time. I mean,
mm,
it's short episodes, you know? It's like sitcom episodes, but still it manages to take its time with either a idea or a theme for an episode, um, and takes its time with the actors. Sometimes we have scenes where not a lot is even said, but what happens is so funny and so
mm.
diabolically funny. I think, you know, it kind of dark comedy in a way gives you a bit of a whiplash, and I like that. I like watching stuff that makes me think differently or like puts another perspective to something that you know just never seen it that way. Or like the character work in Barry is really what makes it. It's
Mm.
character work, and I think, you know, using the whole stage and theater like a discipline and performances, juxtaposing it to like the show that's really these character studies with these fascinating characters who find themselves together. It works so well. I love when form and content marries. Like that's,
Mm.
yeah, I've always loved that. I think that's a sign of a good, well written, solid piece of anything. Yeah, so
That's a great way of putting it. And also, like, I 100% agree with you about the character work. And also, you really put your finger on something with the amount of time that they take with things, too. Because as you were speaking, I could see so many scenes in my head where they take their time to such a like almost excruciating extent that it's brilliant. Like I'm picturing Barry riding his moped or
I
moped
was thinking the same
the
thing. Yeah.
motorbike, yeah, where it's like through all the cars and it's like just, and you hear the buzzing of it and you see the people that are trying to shoot them and just the tension that builds as they take their time in that scene, I thought was phenomenal. And also, yeah.
Absolutely. It felt like, sorry, it felt like 5 minutes, but
Mm-hmm.
then I mean it was so engaged and it was so intense, and then the payoff was this brilliant
Mm-hmm.
comedy, we're like, okay,
Yeah.
that happens. I don't want to spoil it for people that still want to watch Barry, which
Same.
everybody should. It's really good. But
Mm.
yeah, no, that's I mean, like comedy, it's set up and punchline, and Barry does that, yeah, like faultless, really. It's just really great.
It is. And like you say, never at the expense of the character. I never feel like they're just getting the joke in. It's always fits within the character, which I
100%.
love, as you said.
100%. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I could talk shows with you all day, but I also want to
I
know about
know.
you as a comedy creator. Because I know that, like you say, you've created the comics. I know you've also written a comedy drama. You worked in theatre. So I'd love you to just pick whichever project you want to speak to and tell us a little bit about the concept behind it and what it was that drew you to it, why you was like, there's comedy here that I want to dig into.
Well, interesting, because I think we're kind of, without even speaking about it or discussing it, kind of developing a theme for our pod episode here, because it was back in 2014 where I was approached by a woman that I used to study with, and she was like, "Listen, I want to produce my first film. Would you write me something?" And we wanted to do, back then there was a push for like more female led comedies, so we were like, let's do an all female led, like a something about three sisters, kind of estranged sisters who end up like back home for reasons. That was like the
Mm.
basic bare minimum premise that I was like suggested, that they suggested to me, and I was like, okay, cool, I'll roll with it. And it was really fun writing. I wrote it in my, so English is my second language. I wrote it in my first language, which is Afrikaans. But with a lot of, we mix Afrikaans and English a lot also. We are not like purists or anything. So, yeah, so I wrote, for instance, and this is like maybe a tip for people on how you can make something, because it was a dramedy, but it was also like dark comedy vibes, how you can make something that is like dark and serious funny. Because I was like,
Mm.
okay, so we decided they all go back home because mom died. Very simple, very easy plot, because a lot of it was again more character driven. So it was the characters that really made like the story pop and shine. But yeah, so mom needs to die. So I decided to actually write the first scene where we see mom like standing like on this cliff type edge, on top of a quarry, and she's thinking of, this is it, she wants to end things. But then this thing happens and she's like, laughs at herself, like, what is she even thinking? And then as she goes to walk away, all of a sudden a falcon drops a turtle on top of her head and she dies. So the next scene is like the cops finding her out here in the middle of nowhere, and they're like, a turtle? Like everyone's like, and this one guy's just going on, but yeah, this happens. Like the falcons are crazy, like it's just this absurd scene that happens because the mother just died. So yeah, I think that's again like going back to how you subvert, because that's like kind of a shocker, but it's one that will instantly make people laugh, and that's setting the tone for, it's okay, you can laugh in this movie. That's the idea. And yeah, it was fun writing that. It actually got picked up in 2019, right before the pandemic hit. And then the pandemic came and it was like put on hold. Production was put on hold at first. And then eventually it got shelved. Like, yeah. So it was kind of a bummer. I was so excited. Like, yay, finally, first movie. Because I've written a couple of screenplays on commission. But this was now finally the one that's going to get made. And then COVID happened. And, well, yeah, now I do other things. So it's okay. Maybe one
Yeah.
day still.
I hope so, because you have me with that concept and that image. I mean, that's just
Right?
brilliant. It's just so
Yeah,
good. So I really hope it gets made. And what
thanks.
is it you think that draws you to absurdity? Because I think I'm also I'm both drawn to things that feel really real and also to absurdity, to both.
Yeah, 100%. I love that you do too. I love meeting fellow absurdist fans.
Mm.
I actually, I remember when I was in high school and I first learned about absurdism and Beckett and existentialism in general, I was very much drawn to it. I've always been a bit of a thinker, you know. I
Mm.
was the one of those kids that thought a lot, and
Yeah.
yeah. So when I started like doing that and acting too, and doing, I love Beckett so much. I used to be such a nerd and call myself a Beckett baby,
Oh.
but he's had such a influence on me really and my writing, and I just love his work. But yeah, I think it's kind of that thing where you question things in life, and so many things are so contradicting, and that's what absurdism is really. It's like trying to find meaning in a meaningless life, and the concept of that is what is absurd. But yet we do, because what are you supposed to do? Kind of, it's winnie and happy days. It's Yeah, I do see life a lot like that. What I love about absurdist works though is that it allows you to laugh at it, and
Mm.
not be overly serious and depressed about it.
Mm.
I mean, because that can happen. Depression is around the corner, but yeah, it usually, those types of works allows you to laugh at it, and I think that's a good thing. I think we need to do that, otherwise, yeesh, good luck to all of us.
Yeah. And again, I so feel you. I too am quite the thinker and also about all things existential and have been like for as long as I can remember. I am that creepy kid that's like thinking about death and where we come from and all the questions like before
Dark
is
thoughts.
really appropriate to just happy conversations. But then
Yes.
absurdity creates such a lovely balance the other way. Like I do call myself like ridiculously serious because I will get so serious and then realize how ridiculous I am and then flip back the other way. So it's like the turtle falling from the sky. It
Yes.
saves you from descending.
Exactly. It's like the trigger that just pops you back, and
Yeah.
gets you out of the hole of despair.
Yeah, and also it makes it a lot more enjoyable for me to watch and read because I do enjoy really quality drama, but sometimes I just find it too much. I feel like I feel too much, and it really helps me to have the
Heavy.
absurdity to if we're going to look at a funeral, am I going to look at grief and all the things I want to watch? I would much rather have like a dramedy, a comedy drama, some surrealism, some absurdity thrown in.
100%. I think about that one scene in, have you seen Garden State? You remember Zach Braff's movie Garden State?
I have
Um,
not.
they've
No,
Oh, really? Oh, you have to check
no,
that out
I
sometime.
will.
They've got it's some interesting scenes. Like, I think it was his first feature film. So it's very indie, very experimental back then. Also, it had a whole like controversial thing with a manic pixie dream girl.
Mm.
That was oh no, I can't remember her name. Oh gosh, the actress in it, I'm blanking.
Oh, don't
Such a
worry.
famous actress. Anyway,
We can
yeah.
look it up.
Oh, that's embarrassing. Just blanking. Anyway, but I mean, the movie's not perfect or anything, but there's a funeral scene in it that is so absurd and hilarious and cringe, and like that's the kind of thing that we love. I
Mm.
mean, nobody wants to watch a. Nobody even likes going to a funeral. Why do I want to
Mm.
watch an all serious, very sad funeral? If it's not like, yeah, very, like, I just don't want to.
Yeah.
But give me the funny stuff. Give me the uncomfortable. Someone says or does something very inappropriate, like that the one should never do at a funeral. They did it. Give me that. I mean, yeah, it's great to watch. I also prefer watching those kind of things than something that's just dripping with the melodrama and the.
Yeah.
I love my melodrama at times. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but you know what I'm saying.
I do. I do. And I'd love to ask you about the comic as well, if you don't mind, because I would say that I am quite a beginner reader when it comes to comics and graphic novels, but it's something that I'm starting to read more and appreciate more. And I'm also a beta reader, and I'm reading and providing feedback on comics for people, but I don't feel equipped to do it because comedy in that genre is a whole kind of different game. So I'd love to know, when you were writing the comic, again, it'd be great for us to know a little bit about the concept, and also any things that you really learned about craft while you were creating it.
Interesting that I didn't really grow. We had comics here, but back in the 90s in South Africa, we had the bare minimum, like, imports and exports and all of that wasn't what it is today. So we had some, and I remember usually like reading comics when I were at friends' houses because they had the comics. But I never really I didn't read a lot of comedy comics either. I think like maybe the quirkiest comics that I read was X-Men because I loved X-Men. But yeah, what happened is I was working at bunny.com, and my editor there, after like we closed shop with at the site, my editor emailed a couple of us and said, "Oh, so like the Trailer Park Boys from Canada want to do a comic about their show. Who's interested?" And I had actually written a local comic before that, that was way more serious. And I kind of said after the first edition came out that they should maybe get someone else because I didn't really feel like I wanted to do something that serious in a comic form. So when this happened, and it's Trailer Park Boys, and it's like just these fun, again, very character driven, but because it's all about the characters, I was like, okay, sweet. And I watched, I mean, they have so many seasons out. I binge watched so much Trailer Park Boys to kind of get into the characters, get into the voices, and because that was the trick, really. And I was surprised that I could, like, do it in a natural way. I actually told my husband, I think it might I have music background, and I think that might have helped because every character has a certain rhythm, so I could pick up on their rhythms very easily. So when it came, because I mean, writing a comic is pretty much writing dialogue. You set up the frame, which is the scene, the set, but it's one frame, so it's like outside car park day. It's as simple as that, and then you've got the characters with their dialogue. So it was just getting that rhythm and kind of mimicking to make it sound exactly like them. And that's really the trick with that is if you're doing that. I mean, obviously, like with my first comic, I had to create the characters from scratch so I could do whatever I wanted. But this was kind of like writing a spec script for an existing TV show that, I don't even know if people still do that. I remember people used to do that a lot back in the day, writing spec scripts and trying to, burst into the industry with those. It's kind of like that. Just pick up on the characters and you learn a lot. You learn why this guy is funny because he actually talks very funny or like in a staccato, unnatural kind of way that is hysterical. Or this guy actually just grunts the whole time and that's what makes him funny. And those little things that adds to the comedy and adds to the characters and just nailing that. Yeah, that was fun. Like I enjoyed that. The story that I wrote was wild. The guys basically, because they smoke a lot of weed and they do a lot of shrooms, and they basically started tripping and seeing little garden gnomes come to life, and it was hysterical. Yeah, very proud of that one.
Yeah, so you should be. I love the sound of that. And I love thinking about the different rhythms of the characters. That's like a really great bit of practical advice that is so easy to forget. When you're thinking about creating characters from scratch, the ones that you have in your head, whether it was for your film or for other projects that we may not have discussed, do you have any favorite go-tos for creating comedy characters from scratch?
I think, yeah, for me, it's always like I like finding a character's vice first and foremost. I
Oh,
think if you can find your character's vice, it just unfolds really. Because I think that's what makes people the most interesting. Like, it also, because what we do with our vices a lot of the times is we hide them, so you pretend. But that's the way you pretend, kind of, it's countering that. So I think vices inform a lot of that, and you can find a lot of comedy in there, because it's also a source that can be embarrassing or like make people do silly random things, or you get what I'm saying? Like,
I
yeah.
do.
So I like, yeah, thinking about what would this character not want anybody to know about them? And that usually is, yeah, a good source for some comedy to just naturally happen.
That's genius. I've never heard anyone give that advice before. And it's
Oh,
so
cool.
good because it sounds so fun. So I'm literally going to
It
go back
is.
through my novel and all the characters in it. And when I write short stories and ask that question because it's really fun.
I
I
love
love that.
that. Oh, that's cool. That's
That's
cool. Yeah,
genius.
try that. I like
Yeah.
it.
Wonderful. And do you have any particular settings that just really like tickle your fancy when it comes to comedy? That if you had like an unlimited budget, you don't have to worry about the constraints of the film or the series that you're like, I would totally set my piece there.
Wow. I love carnivals. Carnivals,
Oh,
it's such a weird place because just so many things can happen there and it's so vibey. And I think people's energies are just automatically kind of lifted, you know? Yeah, I think maybe like that. But also, it's actually, I've never thought of this question. I don't think I have a specific, like, ooh, I would love to do that there. But yeah, I mean, the carnival just came to mind now.
yeah, but that's brilliant because again, I think everything's like you say, slightly amplified, slightly off kilter, and if we combine carnival with people's vices, now my goodness, it's going to be
Oh
chaos. I
my
love it.
goodness. I love
So
that. Yeah. Hey, we're starting to get ideas here. I love
yes,
it.
I love it. And I'd love to know if there's any particular comedy writers who you really love, just because I think often they don't really get enough credit. I've got a few. For example, I really love Georgia Pritchett, who writes on Succession. I think she's wonderful. I love trying to find out which scene she's written. Like, for example, she wrote the scene where they've kind of been sealed into the not so good safe room, and it's with Greg and the water bottles. It doesn't matter if you haven't seen the scene, but it's just so funny, and she wrote that, so I think she's amazing. And also really love, she's written a brilliant memoir that isn't like any other memoir that I've read. It's like lots of short little scenes that build up throughout her life, and it's just genius and heartbreaking and funny. So I think she's
Lovely.
she's a writer that I really admire. Are there any particular comedy writers that you really admire and love?
It's funny that you mentioned her because, yeah, that was the first person I thought of. Like, I mean,
Oh,
I just love the writing on that show. It's really, if I think of comedy writers now, I think of that because it's just so good. But yeah, honestly, I actually have more horror favorite writers
oh, do
than
you? No, tell us. It could
comedy.
be horror as well. I just like to give a shout out to some writers. Who do you like in
But
horror?
yeah, listen, like from a literature point of view, I
Yeah.
mean, I when I discovered Terry Pratchett in my 20s, I was a
Mm,
goner. I was done for. I absolutely just love his like silly kind of absurdist humor that he uses. I mean,
mm,
it's so fun and again, that's the kind of thing that I enjoy, you know. It's not bashing you over the head for trying to be too clever or anything. It's just
mm.
fun, but still like saying a lot of things, you know. Um yeah, and then horror, oh, I'm a boring nerd who really just thinks Stephen King is that good. I recently read
Yeah.
If That Bleeds, all his short
Oh,
stories. So
I
good.
haven't read
So
that.
good. Do yourself a
Just,
favor. If It Bleeds, it's four short stories. One is actually more like a novella.
mm.
It's just four. They're four completely different stories. I, full disclosure, I cried so much in one of them. It was so good.
Oh.
I was like, Stephen King, what are you doing? Getting all sentimental on me now.
Oh.
It was just amazing. But yeah, I think, yeah, I read so much with my crack job. Like
Yeah.
it's a lot of research that we do
Mm.
with like that kind of online blogging, journalism type of stuff. So I just read a lot of things. I honestly can't even tell you half of the people that I read because I'm
No, I'm
terrible with
sure.
remembering names. But I'll always, if I read a good article, I'll always remember that article. So like,
Mm.
I can think about it and go search it and send it to someone that I wanted to read or whatever. But yeah. Now you're right though. Comedy writers should get more prep. I should
Yeah.
also be giving them more prep.
Oh no, but that's great, and but that's a lovely recommendation for me. Thank you, because I'm doing the Ray Bradbury 1,000 Nights challenge at the minute. I think I'm on like night 189 or something, where you read a poem, a short
Nice.
story, and an essay. So I'm like, I am totally going to
Perfect.
get that Stephen King book and read those four short stories. So thank
Nice.
you. That's,
I hope you enjoy it. It's not too
yeah.
scary.
Well, it's good for me to be a little bit scared, and I can manage a bit better in fiction because I can kind of pull it away and cover it up, and
Yes,
a bit easier than trying to watch through my fingers. So I love that.
exactly.
And I would love to talk to you for hours, but I'm just going to ask you one more sort of craft industry based question, and then we'll wrap up with a little bit of advice and where to find you. But in terms of craft, I would just love to know for other people who would be interested in the kind of job that you have at crack.com, that you've mentioned how much research that you do and how many things you have to watch. And I love your pieces because they are so great on analysis. Like they're really joyful and fun to read, but they are really smart. Like they take things that I kind of half think about and make them much more coherent and give me more things to check out. But I can see the amount of work that goes into them. So I'd love to know, like, from when you started with that kind of work to where you are now, what do you think's helped you improve? And what advice might you have for someone who thinks, oh, I'd like to give that a shot. I would like to try writing articles about comedy.
Honestly, again, it's the same thing that most people will tell you. Read, 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 read. Don't stop reading. Read as much as you can. If you if you want to go into comedy writing, read comedy writing. If you want to, like, if it helps if you get, the more specific you get, almost, because then
Mm.
it actually
Hmm.
makes it easier. Because with comedy, it's so broad. I mean, every day we're trying to figure out at Cracked, okay, what is hitting right now? What do people, sometimes there'll be properties that we think, oh, people will love this. Ted Lasso, new season just
Mm.
came out. But for some reason, people aren't really like, clicking on the articles, which is
Mm.
always fascinating to kind of, get a gauge on our readers and stuff. But yeah, that's the thing about if it's just comedy and it's a very broad, like, theme basically that you're going for. But yeah, just read everything, because that not only gives you confidence, but you learn just a lot and you find your own voice. I mean, it's
Mm.
obviously you find your own voice when you're writing too, but it all happens when you read. That's where it starts, because you're like, oh, I like this, or oh, I would say it a different way. That's good. It's like the same, advice that people always say: read bad stuff too. See what doesn't work and why, because that is how you learn and basically, become self-taught in all of that. Because it's really just at the end of the day. I mean, thank you so much for the compliments. I love that you like love my stuff, but it's just my opinions. It's just how I think about things, and like it's sometimes daunting, because I would not at all say that I'm an expert and I know everything and everything I say is right, because it's not. But yeah, you kind of have to be brave with, coming out and saying
Mm.
something or doing an analysis on something and giving your point of view on it. And so yeah, that's also, I guess, another good tip is try and, if you read something, what is your point of view on it? Do you have a different point of view on it? Because that's always the key too. Obviously, we don't want to read the same article 100 times written by 100 different people, but it's really just the same thing. You want to read from like a different point of view. So if you can find your own, yeah, then, go for it. Try it out. Pitch to places that are taking submissions. Don't pitch to places who aren't. They will not
Yeah.
like it. But, yeah, I think a lot of writing comes down to courage.
Mm.
I mean, it's something that I have struggled a lot with. I've had imposter syndrome for a very long time, until I realized, yeah, I need to get over that now. And yeah, I mean, and you do just keep pushing. And yeah, I mean, you get to a point where you don't even really think about it anymore. I did a Jesse Plemons article today for Cracked. I wrote one that's coming out in 2 days. And just about 5 times Jesse Plemons showed up and made everything better. And just about his fantastic performances. And I wrote it in like an hour 15 minutes. And I mean, it was just so easy, because you get used to it. And later on, you don't really have to think about it. You're just writing your own opinion, and the format comes on its own, because you're kind of used to it. And yeah, you just keep cracking at it until you feel comfortable, I guess.
I think there's so much good advice in there. And it's so helpful what you're saying about point of view and being brave about your opinion, because I do think it is what really separates it out. Because there's so many articles that we come across on social media, and so many that we'll scroll past, or so many that we'll read, but won't really stick with us. But that's what separates yours out. Because again, when I'm like, I just have such strong responses to them. I'm like, this is a real person. This is great. Like I end up, which is great. Like you feel like you can connect. And if you weren't being so brave and clear about your opinion, and I really respect that you do, and I'd respect if there was one that I disagreed with as well, I'd be like, no, but I would love it just as much. That is evoking that response, but in a lovely, thoughtful way. And you make it look so easy because it's so fun to read. But like I say, I write too, and I know it's not. So I love your
Yeah.
bravery. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you. I
And
love to
if
hear it.
Yeah. And for people, you must go and check out Zanandi's work. Where's the best place to connect with you and find you?
I think the best place is, for now, still until it dies, Twitter.
Mm.
Yeah, find me at Zanandi at Twitter. I share all my work there. It's definitely the easiest place. I'll be on Crack's front page every other day of the week. But yeah, Twitter is where I usually do some self promotion, even though I hate it. But as a
Oh.
writer in this economy, you got it. So yeah, Twitter is a good place. It's where we found each other. That's awesome.
Yes, so that's why it's so great. It does have some good things. And I will be sure to
Absolutely.
put your Twitter link in the show notes. And also I will link to some of the crack.com articles that you've written that I just love. They're so smart and so fun and so
Awesome.
helpful. Thank you so
Perfect.
much. It's such fun talking to you. You're awesome.
It was. Yeah, we should do this again. We'll
Yes.
circle back. When you've done like after a year, you circle back to the people, like, so how are we doing
Yeah.
now? And then we'll have another chat about all the great comedies.
100%. That's a great idea. Let's do that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle.